to me, collaboration, referring cases, co-counseling cases is the one thing that has helped BLF / me personally / our team of attorneys grow faster, because you get to work with somebody else, bounce ideas off, and nobody is good at everything.
No.
I don't care who you are.
When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 69 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Today, I'm joined by not just a colleague, but a great friend and someone I've had the privilege of working alongside for years, Russell Button. Russell's the founder of the Button Law Firm, where he's built a practice dedicated to standing up for those who've been wronged, specifically in daycare and child injury cases. His passion for trial law is undeniable, and over the years, we've worked together on some really tough cases, learning from each other and pushing each other to be better. What makes Russell stand out isn't just his skill in the courtroom, it's his belief in the power of collaboration. Russell and I built a brotherhood through this work, and today we're diving into the lessons we've learned along the way. Russell, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you, man.
It only took me 69 episodes to get you on here.
It's been a while.
All right, let's start off. Let's let everybody get to know you a little bit. Tell me about your background. Where did you grow up, and how did you get to find your interest in the law?
So from DFW area, from around here, and went away for all my school. I played college basketball, and that was, one of the big tipping points. That's a big reason of why I am the lawyer that I am. But went away for all my schooling and came back when I became a lawyer.
Okay, so let's talk about college athletics. Right, I did not play college sports. I played sports through high school and growing up. Learned a ton from it. Right, that's one of the reasons why I have all my kiddos in sports growing up. Learn how to be a part of a team, learn resilience, learn how to lose, learn how to win, learn all of those things. So you played college basketball. Tell me a little bit, what did basketball teach you, or what did you kind of learn about yourself, especially at that collegiate level where things are next level?
Man, so honestly, I wouldn't even have been a lawyer had I not played basketball. And so my journey starts even before I ever went to college on winding up who I am, but also in the lessons I learned, but also just becoming a lawyer and a trial lawyer at that. When I first was growing up in the late 90s, everybody knows the movie A Time to Kill that came out.
Yeah.
And
John Grisham. And I remember we didn't really have TV, but at some point I watched that movie. And that movie was the first image of a lawyer to me, because I didn't grow up with lawyers. Yeah.
And so always remembering that. Fast forward as I dedicated myself to basketball and wanted to take it as far as my abilities and talents would take me. When I was in high school, I played for a travel team that was sponsored by a famous criminal defense attorney, and his name was Al Mendez, and he was like a second father to me at that time. And it was through him that I actually met my first real lawyer. Through him that, being on those road trips, when we would all go to bed, he would stay up all night preparing for trial, but he was always there. And he helped me get into college, get my scholarship, helped me through undergrad, helped me get into law school. And then he was still around during the early years of my being a lawyer and a trial lawyer and really guiding me through that. He got to watch me in action a few times before he ultimately passed far too young for his time. And so basketball led me to being able to learn what a trial lawyer was and follow that dream.
And so there you are, on a basketball trip on your travel league, and you see this guy up till the wee hours of the morning preparing, and that inspired you?
Absolutely. It starts with your parents, right?
Yeah.
My parents have had an immense work ethic. They've always had multiple jobs. Worked around the clock. For me, work was normal. Like the work ethic that it takes to be a really good anything, let alone a trial lawyer or a business owner or a leader, whatever your path is, it all starts with the work ethic, starts with preparation. I learned that from my parents, but seeing that in a lawyer and seeing the change that he could make, seeing the influence and the impact that he can have, not just on his clients, but then the community as a whole. And he just chose to parlay that into sponsoring a basketball team and impacting the community in that pathway. But that was where I first saw that when you match something that you can do with your work ethic, that matches a gift to be able to, some people can do it, some people can't.
Right. Absolutely.
And to match the gift. And then it really, being a trial lawyer, and he helped me understand this, it fit what I loved about basketball and all of the stuff that goes into it. And it was his merging of those two worlds that changed my life forever.
It's really interesting that you bring up work ethic because it almost has like a bad name these days, right? You hear all of these people, whenever I think about work ethic, it's funny because I was listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast on the way down here. I love listening to Tim Ferriss, and he was talking about his 4-hour work week. And to me, it almost puts a bad connotation in your head, right? That try to be as efficient as possible, try to only focus on the big things. I don't disagree with those things, but there is still a massive part of that you got to have the work ethic, right? You have all these attorneys who want to go start their own firms. Well, that's great, but you got to be a really good attorney first and foremost.
Yeah.
The only way to become a really good attorney is by working your tail off to learn the fundamentals, by putting in the time, effort, and energy to go learn that skill set. If you don't have those fundamentals, if you don't have the skill set, if you don't have the reps, you're not going to be the kind of attorney that should have their own law firm. You agree with that?
Absolutely. And it's not even just having your own law firm or not. Just take being a lawyer by itself.
Yeah.
And I look at this all the time. You can get to a 2 to 3 year window with a certain skill set. There's always going to be evolution. And within law, within mastery of a skill, within mastering of a craft, and being a lawyer, let alone a trial lawyer that is influenced by so many things and externally, in what's going on in society, how jurors evolve, how the courts evolve, how the laws evolve, all those things. If you don't have a work ethic and you don't enjoy it, where it's not just a job, it's just something that you literally has an art and a craft and a passion. You may be really good for a short period of time, but you're going to get past and you're going to get left behind. And for some people, it's okay. But if you really love what you do, which I love what I do, and I'm surrounded by people that love what they do, whether it's at the BLF firm or externally, that is so important. But forget about even having your own firm. That's just being a lawyer and a leader. It takes time and it takes a lot of effort. And it takes consistency at that over a period of decades and decades and decades. And you can never get there. Wherever there is, it's just you eventually just stop at some point, or it stops you.
Absolutely, man. I was sitting there the other morning thinking through. I started journaling in the morning. We had a podcast last year with Luke Lefevre, and he talked about journaling. And after that, I was sold. I've tried it 100 different times. It never really took, but now it has.
I've told you about it.
You have, and I didn't. I disregarded you. Sorry, Fred.
It's okay.
But so I started doing it, and when I journal, it ends up tending to be 80% about work because that's usually where my mind goes. And the other morning I was journaling and thinking through, okay, as a law firm, as the lawyers at the law firm, where do we need to improve? And so I started kind of talking about the different things that we do, evidence, procedure, different causes of action, trial skills. And then started bullet pointing, how can we get better? And a lot of that is what resources are out there, right? There's a ton of books on what we do, written by really smart people who've had amazingly successful careers. There's continuing legal education. There's driving down to the courthouse and actually watching someone who's good try a case. There's mastermind groups. There's all these different things. And I sat there thinking, man, you could spend 80 hours a week just learning and doing practice reps to get better. And that's just one aspect of what you and I do, owning a law firm. You could spend 100% of your time just practicing law and getting better at that aspect.
Yeah.
Right. And so, all right, you talked about how you got interested in law. When you ended up at law school, you were kind of influenced, it sounds like, by a criminal lawyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you thought you wanted to do, or you didn't really have any interest in that?
I knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer.
Okay.
And specifically a jury trial lawyer. And pretty quickly, there's only a couple of avenues for that: criminal defense, what we do in catastrophic injury, personal injury stuff at the highest level. And then your corporate stuff has a variation of that,
right?
Maybe not as much, right?
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer, and specifically a jury trial lawyer. Where in that, I didn't know when I went to law school, to be honest.
Okay. When you got to law school, did anything surprise you in terms of what you enjoyed, what you were good at, what you really weren't good at?
It's funny. I talk to people about this all the time. School, full transparency, was never easy for me. And everybody who knows me really well knows school was not natural. The whole academic way of doing things is not natural for me. It's not the way I learn. Reading and writing and comprehension is very difficult for me in the academic sense. But learning is something I've always been good at. I just needed my time to do it, and I needed like a certain way of doing it, and I needed to be challenged in a certain way to do it better. Law school for me was honestly about perseverance, effort, right? And really the art of preparation depending on the audience. And, once I got into law school and I figured out sort of how it actually operates, and it's all geared towards passing the bar. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
And if you already know how to learn, you have a work ethic, law school is not going to be difficult for you in that way. It was really just for me figuring out, how are these tests being done and how do I need to consume this information? Because I worked before law school and during law school. That was how I trained to be a lawyer.
Oh.
Law school for me was really just pass to means to an end.
Yep.
And I'm going to pass the bar because I want to be a lawyer more than anything. And I have to go through this process. There's no other way around it. And so law school was compartmentalized in that way. Learning how to be a lawyer in law school was me for working. And for me, working was figuring out what I don't like to do, which I tried a bunch of those things. It was pretty quickly, very evident. And then it was, now how can I get through this as fast as possible?
Yeah.
That was law school. And it just, but I learned the art of preparation more than anybody else. When everybody else stopped, I would still keep studying, still keep going. Not because it mattered with the grade, but just because that was my edge, was knowing that I outworked somebody in preparation.
It's amazing how that willingness to just sit there and outwork somebody really pays off in what we do.
Mm-hmm.
If you sit there and you spend the time in the medical records, if you sit there and you spend the time in the investigation file, if you spend the time pouring through the depositions, even if you feel like you know them backwards and forwards, it's amazing how many times something will become apparent to you. And when you walk into that hearing, when you walk into the trial, when you walk into whatever it is that you're walking into, and you know that you know this file better than anybody,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing how many things end up taking care of themselves and the success that you can find.
Oh, it's like what the people say about luck.
Yeah.
It's just making sure you're ready for the opportunity when they come and putting yourself in that position all the time, over and over and over. That's luck.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then in law school, for luck, it was me knowing I wanted to be a trial lawyer, to answer your question about something that I realized I was good at. Knowing that, I put myself, the only electives I took were all geared towards being a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
And I lucked out in that one of my adjunct professors and the cases that we did as our appeal in law school and the mock trial that we did just happened to be complex personal injury. And it's funny that that's what I gravitated towards, and that's all we do now. Not knowing that that's what I wanted to do when I got into law school. But then when I got into those specific classes doing what I thought I wanted to do, and it just was like, a lab and water, right?
Yeah.
It fit super naturally. And then ever since then, it's been a one-way path. No plan B.
Yeah, I hear you. That's obviously, both of us have only done personal injury throughout the entire time we've been lawyers. And I was lucky enough to, in our big trial at Baylor, I had a personal injury lawsuit that was super involved. It was one that our professor had worked up completely. I don't know if they actually tried that one or not. I don't think they did. I think it got settled. But we got to go, we had a 2-day trial. Usually it's just a 1-day trial. Ours was a 2-day trial because it was a massive case. I loved it. I loved every aspect of it. And a lot of it was the putting together, how are we going to make this point? How are we going to get around these strong points or the bad points in our cases, strong points for the defense? And absolutely love the strategy part of it. And to this day, that's probably the favorite part of what we do is putting together the strategy aspect of things.
No doubt.
So you graduate from law school. What was your first job?
So I worked for an amazingly talented, complex, and catastrophic injury lawyer who was super creative, ultra aggressive in what he did, always thought outside the box, got exposed to cases all over the country. And I worked with him and his team for 2 years and was able to try a handful of cases, was able to basically put about 10 years of experience in 2 years on some major cases. Learned a ton from them. And then that's when BLF was started.
It's amazing getting in those opportunities, those reps, how much it accelerates your learning. There's lawyers out there who do nothing but, draft memos, research document or do research, review documents. That's great. They can make a whole lot of money doing that, but you're not growing.
Yeah.
Maybe you're growing. You're not growing nearly as fast as someone who is at a firm that will throw them into the deep end and let them start taking depots, let them start arguing motions and all those kinds of things. I was kind of in the same boat. I worked for Heartline, a products liability defense firm. Amazing firm with amazing lawyers. Still talk with a lot of them. In fact, we just had a case against Heartline not too long ago. And so I got to reconnect with a lot of those guys. But I tell people I was taking depositions before the ink on my bar card was dry. And, these were really big cases.
Yeah.
And so, I had fantastic mentors who were obviously watching me and making sure I wasn't screwing things up too badly. But the amount of responsibility that I had and the forced strategy that it made me come up with and execute is the absolute best kind of training ground.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably true across whatever profession, right? If you're in there and you're getting those real practice reps, if you're having to come up with solutions and then make sure that those solutions are actually working, and if they're not, then recalibrate and come up with something else, you're going to grow as a professional, as a human being, so much faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about BLF. When you started BLF, what was in your mind? What was your vision for BLF when you very first started it? Or had you even thought that far ahead?
Honestly, BLF started shortly after becoming a lawyer. I mean, I've only been a lawyer for 2 years. And it was just a product of, I tried a bunch of cases. I tried a case 60 days out, being a lawyer, tons of experience. I knew I wanted to do complex and catastrophic litigation. But at that time, I realized that what I wanted was to be a part of, one-off stuff. So it was just a different subset of cases. And be able to kind of learn a little bit slower in the sense of trial. And trial focused only. And so BLF was started because there weren't any other team-based trial firms out there doing the cases that I wanted to do at that time, or at least I didn't know them.
Yeah.
And so I knew what I wanted, which is what we have now. So if I was a young lawyer, I would have wanted to work for a place like us or like you. And there's a handful of them out there that are kind of cutting edge, on the tip of the spear, doing creative litigation, but in a team-based small firm format.
Right.
And that's really what I was looking for. And I had that just in a different type of law. It was largely product liability all around the country, different types of stuff. So when I started BLF, it was solely to try cases. And for 2.5 years, all I did was come in the Friday before trial, sometimes the Saturday before trial, a month before trial. If I was lucky, 3 months before trial. And I would get these cases that other lawyers either needed help trying or they just didn't want to try it and it didn't settle. And they handed me the case and said, go do what you want to do with it. So I was set for trials 2 to 3 times a week, one after another. I'd do focus groups at the end of the week on the cases I had coming up to gain some more experience on my feet. And it was just me and a paralegal or a part-time paralegal here and there. And all I would do is go around and try cases. And, we had a really good week if I won. And, I had to watch the discount aisle if I lost. But having that as your backbone, having that as, I have to be successful. I have to win. I have to learn how to do a better opening statement than anybody else to try to win this case. So I did that for 2.5 years. That was what I envisioned at that time. But to be fully transparent, it was shortly into that journey that I realized something was missing.
Yeah.
And what became of that kind of feeling was I was unsatisfied at that time, had all these verdicts, had tried a ton of cases, could do things that other people at that experience level hadn't done yet. But I wasn't having the relationship with the clients in the case that honestly I enjoy. A lot of lawyers don't. I love it, And then I was unfulfilled in the sense of it wasn't as a part of a team. And going back to basketball and the things I learned from basketball, I wasn't able to do the things as far as the preparation, the build up, the whole start to finish up into the playoffs and get into the championship, that whole season long thing of a case. I wasn't doing that at that time. And so my career actually went backwards. I learned how to try a case. Then I learned how to work it up. Then I learned how to work it from the front end, and get a team. So that was the beginning of BLF. But the vision ultimately was I want to have a small team of people that are like-minded, 100% passionate and creative, and driving forward on something that's super meaningful to us, not just a one-size-fits-all general PI firm.
Right. So it's interesting that you started off as kind of a hired gun, right? There's a few attorneys out there like that today, at least that I know of, who will come in and try cases for firms who don't try cases.
Yeah.
Getting those files at the last minute, super stressful. You develop, I imagine, kind of a ritual of how you go through those cases, how you prepare them. I assume you're trying the same types of cases over and over. So what defense attorneys latch on to. But yeah, man, that is so unsatisfying. You can go get a great verdict, but if you don't have anybody to celebrate it with, it's amazing how unfulfilling that is.
Yeah.
And so you're a relationship guy. That's why you enjoy the 100%. Team so much.
100%.
And I can totally see how that would be unfulfilling for you. That'd be unfulfilling for me too. I feel like a lot of people who do what we do really, truly are in it to help others. And that's where they draw a lot of satisfaction. There is nothing better than hearing that jury verdict, a good jury verdict, and being able to look over at your client and give them a big old hug. Like, hey, you were heard. The jury heard you. And this is the result of all the hard work that everybody's put in on this. And I love it. I absolutely love it. So how did you move backwards? I mean, all of your revenue is coming from trying these cases. You're stacked up at 2 to 3 settings a week. And then the ones that you don't get to that week get pushed out. And so you're going to have to still go try them. How do you carve out time to then start developing your marketing to bring the cases in? And then the time to actually develop those relationships and ensure that everything's going smoothly as the case is being worked up.
Long journey.
I bet.
Long journey. Don't regret it. I would do it again because it made me understand how to work up a case better than anybody else, having to go and try them.
You knew what was important and what wasn't.
Knew what was important. So, understanding case selection probably a little bit better earlier on. But, the magic point along the entire trajectory of going backwards, how did it work? I knew that when we wanted to go to the team-based format, it was going to be a little bit before I got back to being able to have a trial law firm with a docket of cases that were worthy clients and cases that were, stuff we wanted to go all in on and get back into a steady trial routine. I knew there was going to be a backward step in that.
Sure.
And, we just celebrated 10 years at BLF. So when you're looking at it, you're talking 7.5 years to get to that point where, we've got an amazing, small, efficient docket of cases we can go all in on and spend more time than anybody else on it, pour all of our resources and firepower into them. And it's been fun, obviously, especially these last few years. I probably didn't anticipate how long it was going to take to get there, but I'm glad that we did it the right way for us, because now the product that we do have, the team that we do have is perfect for what we like to do.
Obviously, the majority of PI claims out there are auto claims or some sort of roadway incident or premises case. That's how you built your firm up, right? That's how you were able to fund creating the team and building the team and get to where you could be more selective on the cases that you took. How did you settle in on daycare and child injury cases?
So it was a collection of things. I've always been, I started with a complex and catastrophic injury attorney. That's who I learned from. And he's amazing to this day. I still follow his work. So that world of being the lawyer that other lawyers go to when they can't figure out the case, or it's a little bit not in their wheelhouse / a little bit more confusing than they're normally accustomed to, or just requires a little bit more elbow grease or something like that. That's always what I've done. And so when I started BLF, the trials weren't just your typical car wreck, trip and fall, slip and fall. They were also just complex things that the lawyer that built the case just didn't happen to also be a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
So I got to try very unique cases and be a part of that process as well. So once we got going in BLF and we were building this team-based format, obviously you have to take, your trucking stuff, your car wrecks, your trip and fall, slip and falls. But over the course of those years, you learn a lot of what you don't enjoy doing as much.
Sure.
Right? Not that you didn't enjoy it at the time, but it just isn't something you want to do day in and day out. And my rule of thumb has always been, am I willing to wake up at 3 a.m. to go do something on that case? Which is earlier than my normal start time, even though I'm a morning person.
Right.
But am I willing to sacrifice some of my personal, morning time, get up early, stay up late for whatever it is that we're doing? Forget the value of the case, just the client, the type of case, and the cause that we're doing it for. And so over BLF's history, it was a process of elimination of doing all these things and saying, I would be okay if I didn't do another one of these cases again. But there are some really good lawyers out there that love those cases. You know what? Let me refer them to them, or let me co-counsel with them, better yet, and learn how they work a case that they're super passionate about. Let's see what we can learn and apply it to ours. And then it was also reading some books, which I know we'll get to later.
Right.
And a part of those books was honing in on a niche. And, I've always wanted us to have like a go-to thing that was very unique. And it took a lot of years to find it.
And I think that's a huge mindset thing, right? Niching down, because so many PI firms do whatever personal injury there is. A lot of firms do PI and family law or estate planning or whatever. And so just niching down to PI, I think is a fantastic start, right?
Yeah.
You want a team of specialists.
Yeah.
And so then taking that broad PI umbrella and niching down to pretty specific, which is what you are.
Yeah.
That's really scary to a lot of people, because what you're doing is you're taking out potential clients. And so how did you come to the decision of, what, I think there's enough of this out there that we can support the firm. Everybody can make a solid living, and we're still going to really, really help people.
It takes time, I think, is the first thing. But how it's always started for me, and, during most of BLF's history, It was shortly after the whole trial lawyer stuff that I realized we wanted to do a team-based, very niche-focused PI complex and catastrophic law firm, right? Like that was the transition. It was, hey, I know we're going to get there. We just got to get there.
Right.
And for me, I got lucky that I partnered up with Ashley Narr. That was my first team-based hire, right? And we hit it off, and all she had done was complex and catastrophic niche cases. So, and I already had a docket of them, so it was really just, I got lucky in that regard, and one of those cases happened to be a daycare case. So I've always had daycare cases from the beginning because they're things that, they're cases that lawyers don't typically handle. They don't typically get all around the country. And for years we handle cases all around the country. So you kind of look at that and you're starting to see these patterns pop up. But what it was for us on niching down, and while it's scary, it goes towards anything that is successful when you are blazing a trail, right?
Yeah.
When something has never been done, there's always going to be a moment in time when you're like, is this going to work? And you just have to say yes. And when you say yes, you will make it work, and I think that's more of how I looked at it. Was I realized we were really good at daycare and child injury cases, had a passion for it, loved the causes, didn't matter the value of the case because we treated every case as a big case. There was a huge need for it, very underrepresented and very underhandled properly. Like I know that's not exactly grammatically correct.
Hey, it's Russell Button's episode. You can make up words if you want to.
That is how I talk. But it was kind of a subset of the PI world where it wasn't given the attention that some of these other popular cases were. And so by niching down, what it allowed us to do is get into what is kind of my core value of be better than anybody else at it, because I know I'm going to dedicate more time to it. We have a systematic mindset, so we're going to be able to turn it into really good systems that allow that personalization and just pour everything into it and build a whole team around it. Not just, hey, we do these, but it's everything from the intake to the onboarding to the way we handle the case and the way we close out the case to the way we market for the case is all geared towards this one area. And when you can do that, and when we focused on that, it took care of itself over time. So is it scary? Sure. It always is scary. Anything is scary that you do. But by learning from others, my father's a huge mentor. He niched down in his construction world to the type of thing he did, and he did it really well. And you see it with sports teams all the time. They have an identity. Yeah. Right. And you hear people talk about that. Oh, that team is this, or that team always plays this way. And so I see all these references, and it made sense for us because it's cases that we love doing. It's clients we love representing, working parents. And it's the most vulnerable members of our society, little kids, innocent kids. So daycare and child injury cases became our focus, and we got all of our attention into it. And we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg. In my opinion, we're just getting started.
Absolutely. So let's talk about how we met, because it's a good transition right there. I had a good friend reach out to me, and their child had been injured at a daycare facility. And as I looked into it, I started realizing, one, I hadn't handled one of these cases before, which that's fine. But as I started researching more and more into it, I realized, this is a little bit more complex. You're dealing with government agencies. You're dealing with things that I hadn't had to deal with before. And anytime I find myself in that situation, I don't want to be using a client to learn off of. Right. Unfortunately, I don't think everybody feels that way. Yeah. And so I started asking around my network, hey, anybody handled these daycare cases before? And your name came up. So I reached out and said, hey, Russell, my name's Scott. I have a daycare case. I hear you handle those. And you said, yeah, tell me about it. And I did. You said, awesome. Let's collaborate. Let's do this together. And I thought that was a fantastic way for me to learn about daycare cases. And along the way, we had lunch. And I think, our hour-long lunch turned into probably about 3.5 hours of us just shooting the bull, and we were very similar in our thoughts and in our approaches and things that we enjoyed and our perspectives on life.
Yep.
And from that point forward, man, it has been just nothing but momentum.
It has been.
And so, I've learned a ton from you on daycare cases, childcare cases, just strategy, sitting and putting together hit lists for depots and all that kind of stuff. So tell me a little bit about why you think collaboration is so huge for a trial attorney.
It's difficult for some people, whether you're a lawyer or not, to collaborate with somebody else or another business or what have you, for certain types of people. For me, it's never been difficult because I came up in a team sport. My sport was a team sport. I was a point guard of all things. So,
so you had
to work with other people, had to figure out how this person likes, the pass to them, where this person's favorite spot is, how to manage everything, how to manage the clock, how to know when to push pull, right? So team-based stuff also requires you to be okay with the ultimate goal of a successful moment, whatever that is in your profession. And for us as lawyers, especially, what we do is winning the case.
Yeah.
Right. And it's holding them accountable. It's getting full value. It's making it right. It's sending a message. All of those things is why we ultimately do what we do. And there is a winner and a loser, in what we do. And I love that from sports. I love competition. I think it brings out the best in me, and therefore the people that we've surrounded ourselves with on the team. But for collaboration, you got to be okay being part of a team and taking one step back. And you'll never hear me say, like, I did this, right, or me and this team, No, man, it's the team. It's we, it's us. I've always believed in that mindset. I've always believed in that philosophy. You win as a team, you lose as a team. And we figure it out together and you learn those lessons. Well, with that, within the team format is collaboration. So whether, for law firms, when we get to work together, or there's a case that's not in our wheelhouse and we want to work with somebody who does that specific thing, be it med mal, be it, a huge premises liability case, or lawyers in other states that we refer these cases to, us being able to collaborate and see how they work and vice versa makes us better, faster, and it's ultimately even better for the client. And I think that's what the greatest part about it is. You recently resolved a case that we had sent over to you that when we looked at, what happened on that case, and what it was when we got it in, and what those clients needed. And man, they needed help and they needed justice. And we sent that case to you, and it was 2 clients, and you slammed it home. I mean, you freaking dominated it. And when we looked at the result at the end of the day, yes, it was you, and that makes me happy, right? And that makes our whole team happy. And the clients were elated, and they got the help they needed from a medical standpoint, treatment standpoint, but also they got amazing justice,
right,
and held this company accountable. But when we look at like how that transpired, it made us better because we can look at what you did along the way, and we can turn that into how we're handling our cases on our end. So to me, collaboration, referring cases, co-counseling cases is the one thing that has helped BLF / me personally / our team of attorneys grow faster, because you get to work with somebody else, bounce ideas off, and nobody is good at everything.
No.
I don't care who you are, myself included. I know where I'm not the best, but I know what I'm really good at when I have the time to prepare for it. And I know what the other people on the team are really freaking good at when they have the time to prepare for it. And together, watch out, and it's like the wolf pack. And that's on our wall. That quote is up there. The strength of the wolf pack is the collective unit. It always is. It's not the individual. It's everybody working together as a united front. So collaboration is how we run BLF, but it's also how we collaborate and refer externally with other firms.
Yeah. And I think, one of the big problems for the firms that don't collaborate, or why they don't collaborate, ego.
Yeah.
And well, I don't want to split fees. Well, I got to tell you, there's been plenty of cases, certainly the ones that you and I work together, where I have zero doubt the fees took care of themselves, because between the collaboration, we were able to come up with some amazing strategies and execute on those strategies that I don't think our firm individually or even your firm individually would have come up with.
Yeah.
Because there's this magic when you collaborate with other people.
Yep.
I'm throwing my ideas out, you're throwing your ideas out, and the ideas that we end up coming up with never would have happened had we not been collaborating.
Agree with that.
So, all right, we are almost out of time, Russell. So last question. And I know you've prepped for this one because you know it's coming. Give me your top 3 book recommendations. And it can be anything. Business, non-business. Go for it.
Well, it's easy. I mean, there's a ton of trial lawyer books, but this audience isn't all just trial lawyers.
Correct.
So I think the 3 most impactful books for me in no particular order is Traction, Essentialism, and Extreme Ownership. So Extreme Ownership is obviously Jocko. I think you're one of his sponsors. I'm not really sure. He's a sponsor of you, one of the two.
I bought a lot of his mulch.
Yeah.
I bought a lot of his proceeds.
We've bought a lot of the books too. But Extreme Ownership, we make everybody read it that joins BLF. We recommend it to everybody. And it's all of the books under that whole umbrella of leadership, but that's kind of the primary one. But Extreme Ownership is truly the leadership book that follows the pathway of executing, preparing and planning, autopsying your successes and your failures, and then moving on and figuring out the next thing, owning it when things don't go well, and owning it from the top down instead of from the bottom up. And anything that happens, you take ownership of it, figure it out, move on. And so Extreme Ownership is a primary leadership book, that has had a huge influence on me personally and the team. Essentialism is really why we focus on daycare and child injury cases. I read that book a long time ago, and it's honestly one of my yearly rereads. I can't say that I reread every book every year, but that is one of them, because I see something new I wasn't prepared for at a different point in my life. And Essentialism is always about, yes, you can do everything, but you can do a few things really well.
Yeah.
And it's the process of figuring that out, from your daily to-do list to the way you structure your team, to the type of thing that you do and choose to do. So Essentialism is largely why BLF is where it is today. From the cases we handle to the people that join the team to how we go about our work every day and the size of the docket that we have. We've always run a smaller docket.
Yeah.
And then Traction. Traction.
I know Traction well.
Yeah. That's running the business. And, that's all the different facets of the business, and it puts it together. And I think that's just super foundational. So awesome. Those are my 3 books.
Well, my friend, I'm sure we could go on for another 8 hours. No problem. We've done it many a time. But thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your time. And thank you to everyone who has joined us on this episode of the Driven Crowd podcast. We'll see you next time.